reported that Senator Kennedy had been shot.
He's been shot?
That's right.
We just had a lot of the RFK assassination files drop, and they may be even more surprising than the things we learned about the assassination of his brother. Over 10,000 pages declassified by President Trump have us wondering what the CIA's role was in the Robert F. Kennedy 1968 assassination. The assassin, Sharon, doesn't appear to be acting alone when you look at these documents in context. Were there covert ops? Were there cover-ups? Was there hypnotic programming that had an impact on this behavior and connections back to our government? And who are the shadowy handlers that appear to be referenced in a number of these documents? The files confirm what we've long suspected, that the feds did bury evidence, that witnesses vanished, and the truth seems to have gotten a one-way ticket to Area 51. 57 years later, 12%, only 12% of Americans still believe the official story. Mostly troubling is the newly discovered fact that other countries reported on RFK's death to one another in correspondence and chatter before the assassination even happened. This isn't conspiracy, it may be clarity. Rejoining the program, New York Times bestselling author of the book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, veteran political operative Roger Stone. Roger, when we saw this release on the RFK files, what stood out to you?
Well, unfortunately, this is very similar to what we saw in the release of the JFK documents. They are woefully inadequate. There are a lot of obvious things missing. Once again, these documents seem to be cherry-picked to support a false narrative. That would be that Sirhan is the man who killed Senator Robert F. Kennedy. Now, there's two parts of this, Matt. First of all, Kennedy was murdered on the night of his greatest triumph. He had just won the California Democrat primary in 1968 over Eugene McCarthy. A lot of believers in Camelot think he would have gone on to be nominated and then defeat Richard Nixon. What they miss is that John F. Kennedy, in beating Nixon, carried every Southern state. Robert Kennedy could not have carried a single Southern state. Nixon would have beaten Kennedy, but it doesn't matter because Kennedy would not have been nominated. The Democrat convention in Chicago and the firm control of President Lyndon Baines Johnson and Chicago Mayor Richard Daley. But putting that piece of Camelot aside, Sirhan is always in front of Senator Kennedy. He gets off 8 shots. All 8 shots have been accounted for. None of them hit Robert Kennedy. The LA County coroner, Thomas Noguchi, perhaps one of the most famous coroners in the country, in his autopsy says Kennedy was killed by a point-blank shot to the left rear of his skull, meaning shot from behind. The LA Police Department investigation could not have been sloppier. They were still digging bullets out of the woodwork 2 days later, but they have never explained this inconsistency. I think that Sirhan is shooting wildly as a diversion. I also think, based on a number of the things that he writes in prison, where on a piece of paper he writes over and over again, RFK must die, RFK must die, that he was under some kind of mind control, most likely MK Ultra.
Who do you believe killed RFK?
I believe that he was killed by a man named Thane Eugene Caesar. He was a security guard, a Filipino, hired the week before the murder, who left his position days after the murder. He returned to his native Philippines. Robert Kennedy Jr., who's a friend of mine, sought to interview him. Originally, Caesar agreed, and then he withdrew the agreement. It's interesting, there's a great interview of RFK Jr. with Mike Tyson, of all people, in which he restates virtually every fact we've just gone through, but YouTube took that interview down from the internet.
Tulsi Gabbard stoked my curiosity when she referenced the involvement of foreign countries in chatter that seemed to predict the killing before it happened. Take a listen, and I want your reaction.
There are other documents there. I mentioned State Department cables that showed different countries were sending messages to each other around Senator Kennedy's assassination, saying that he had been assassinated, but that was before he was actually killed.
What countries do you think she's talking about, Roger?
Well, the narrative holds that Sirhan was a Palestinian and that his motive in killing Kennedy had to do with Kennedy's support for Israel. I'm not sure that that's accurate. I do know this: Sirhan did not kill Kennedy, not ballistically or physically possible. And then there's the other thing, Matt, and that is very strange couple. They refer this to the woman in the polka dot dress, who are seen running out of the Ambassador Hotel yelling, "We got him, we got him." No follow-up by law enforcement about that at all.
Very surprising. And you made mention on the JFK files that you believe there are other repositories of very critical documents. Where would you point House investigators to now on the RFK matter?
I'm glad you raised that, because in the question of JFK, I think all we have are the records of the National Archives JFK assassination collection. But the place to look is in the same places: the FBI, the Secret Service, the IRS, the State Department, the Defense Department, Army Intelligence. We know that there were documents that the Assassinations Record Review Board, in the case of JFK, examined in the 90s, but they're not reflected in the documents that were released recently. And as you know, Matt, a House committee in the late 70s concluded that organized crime definitely played a role in JFK's murder, yet not a single document released by the government recently, by the order of Donald Trump, involves organized crime.
And why do you think that is? Do you think there are people still in the government that are covering up for organized crime? It was so long ago.
I think that they are trying to continue to steer us towards the false narrative that Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone nut, a Russian communist sympathizer, killed John F. Kennedy and acted alone, while I think trying to wave people away from both the CIA and organized crime, as well as big Texas oil and banking interests, all of whom had an interest in John Kennedy's murder.
Final question for you. I saw you catching some heat online because you had Nikki Fried, the head of the Democrat Party, on your show. And I have Democrats on my show. I debate them. I at times agree with them if it's something I agree on. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to those who think that, like, the only people you ought to have on your show are MAGA or Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, this is the issue here was, I think, a legitimate one, which is the epic corruption in which Ron and Casey DeSantis have been caught red-handed diverting, I believe, $10 million from Medicaid. This is money, Matt, that should be used for health care for older people, poor people, the disabled. It's a legitimate scandal. She's been a legitimate critic. I wanted to get her take on it. I saw your great interview with Alex Andrea. I thought he did a terrific job. You know, we go wherever the facts lead us. We go wherever the truth leads us. It was a great interview, and I appreciate Nikki Fried doing it.
People should check it out, and it does appear that money was diverted around the legislature on purpose for political ads. Roger Stone, make sure to get his book, the most dispositive book, I would say, on the killing of JFK. Appreciate you being on the program.
Thanks, Matt. God bless you, and happy Easter.
Happy Easter.